Okay, please start.
Okay, welcome to our third Fireside Chat sessions on Shin Buddhism in the West and beyond. Today's theme is on practice. My name is Ryoei Nanjo, and I am a member of the steering committee. A few items of importance before we begin today's Fireside Chat. Number one, a questionnaire link has been sent to you. Please do your best to send in your responses within 2 weeks. Also, as this is an informal fireside chat, it is important you keep your video screen on so we can share the session with one another in person, even if it is virtual. And please change your display name as such last name and first name. Finally, if you will not be able to attend the December session, please send an email ahead of time letting us know. We will be grateful if you take a moment to do that. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kenneth Tanaka, who will be serving as our instructor and discussion leader for our sessions. Dr. Tanaka, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Anjo. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all, and thanks for joining. And I hope things are going well with you. There are a couple announcements. One is as you received the information regarding my conversation with Stephen Batchelor, the time doesn't quite fit well with those of you in North America. So if you're interested, please sign up for the recordings to be sent later. Okay, so with that, we would like to begin. And our guests today are Reverend Gregory Gibbs, who's already here, and then Mr. Teo Horta Barbosa, who is Brazilian, his nationality, and he's a member of the Hompa Honganji of Brazilia. I've never been to Brasilia. I've been to Sao Paulo, but would like to visit someday. And he is a graphic designer as far as his occupation goes. And now he lives in Australia. And so can you speak up, Teo, and tell us in 5 minutes, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sensei, for inviting me. My name is Teo. I'm 35 years old, and I'm a graphic designer. I'm a Brazilian adept of Jodo Shinsho that was born and raised in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. And I recently moved to Melbourne, Australia, last year, following my wife, who's doing her PhD here. And as a background, I can say that as most of Brazilian families, my family has a Christian background, and my grandparents were Catholics. My parents had me baptized, and I used to attend church as a kid, many times against my will. And I went to a Catholic high school. And my first contact with Jodo Shinsho was when I was a teenager, going to the Obon festival that was held every year at the Honganji Temple in Brasilia. And at that time, I didn't realize the Buddhism in it. It was more like I was interested in the good Japanese foods and the other Japanese culture presentations like taiko, martial arts. But later on, after a girlfriend break up with me, I found myself searching for answers and ended up in one of the introductory courses on Buddhism offered by the temple. And it was kind of a participatory course where the main goals were to present basic Buddhist teachings and relate it to our lives. And for me, it made a lot of sense. So it was 8 years ago. And after that, I started to engage in other activities in the temple, like attending services and talks, volunteered at the Obon Festival, supporting the temple communications with some graphic design work. And I even became one of the instructors of the Introduction to Buddhism course that I had taken.
Oh.
And yeah, now in Melbourne, I couldn't find a Shin temple or community. So I have been trying to study and practice at home and to hear Dharma talks on the internet, which sometimes is a bit frustrating because I miss the sharing in community. And I have also joined some online sessions, such as this one that we're having right now. And I recently joined a group in Spanish and Portuguese language organized by Enrique Sensei from Spain. So that's my actual involvement.
Okay, great. Great. So, well, let's begin with the first of the questions that we have sent out to everyone. So, this session is on practice, quote unquote practice. Now, as you know, we normally, well, when it comes to practice, it's a theme that has lots of implications because we don't have a clear, well, okay, rather than my talking about it, let's ask. So what do you, Teo? What do we practice in Shin Buddhism? What do you practice? When we say practice, what do you do?
At first, I would say it is reciting the Nembutsu. But if the real Nembutsu comes through us from Amida as an act of gratitude, it would not be something that I can really put effort on. So I think listening to the Dharma would be the practice that allows the Nembutsu to come out somehow. So that is what I can seek to exercise on a daily basis that will lead me to realize my Bonbo nature, that I don't have absolute control over my life. So I think to listen properly to the Dharma, we need to be open, truly open to the teachings, and to make this constant self-reflection and being truly honest to oneself. So for me, that's why it's the really, like I say, that reciting the Nembutsu is the easy practice, but somehow it's also very hard, like to being truly honest to myself and to constant self-reflect on how Dharma implicates in my life. So because my blind passions are always there, like making me want to look good to others, to be a good person, and I constantly find myself relying on my self-power. So yeah, I think really trying to listen to the Dharma is
okay. Can I jump in here and ask you, when you say listening to the Dharma, in what form does it take place? Are you talking about sermons, or does it include studying and reading books? How do you understand listening to the Dharma?
I think it can be like listening to talks and Dharma talks. It can also be studying. I think when we do it with a good teacher and supported by a sangha, it makes everything much easier because we can share and talk about it and try to clarify what the teachings mean to our own lives, and not only try to get a personal understanding that many times can be wrong. So yeah, I think like living together in Sangha and really having a good teacher is something that is really important in this process.
Yeah. So in that respect, you attended, or well, you were part of Brazilia, Hompa Honganja Brazilia, and what was that sangha like for you? You had a great teacher there, you said, yeah.
Yeah. So for most of the years that I was there, we had Sato Sensei as the main the teacher responsible for the temple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Sangha was, I think it's really a unique case in Brazil, because the Sangha in Brasilia was formed by mostly by non-Japanese descendants.
Mm-hmm.
So I've maybe it was something that made me feel welcome when I first attended to the course or to the Introduction to Buddhism course. So I felt that I was really part of that, like I could be part of that, even though I wasn't, I didn't come from a Japanese descent, or I
Yeah.
didn't have Buddhism in my childhood influence. So
Yeah. Okay, good. So you mentioned earlier that when you recite the Nembutsu, that it seems easy, but at the same time it's not easy, because you realize that in doing so, you're not living up to the ideals of being maybe fully selfless and being concerned about others. And so
Mhm.
how is that conflict or contradiction or tension? What are some of the that you feel?
I think it's more, I think it's really related to, I think, to the second question. I would
Yeah.
say that I usually, when that would be like, what's the role of Nembutsu
Yes,
recitation?
yes, that's yeah.
Okay. So that would be like in my everyday life, I see that I usually express gratitude on a somehow in a selfish level, and what I mean by that is there are many times when the Nembutsu comes to me after something good happens. So, like after getting good news, after reaching a professional goal, or having good food, or feeling loved by others, and I know, like, I also developed this habit of mentalizing Nembutsu in a plane before a takeoff and after landing. It's like an irrational attempt to ask for Amida's protection, even though I know Amida is not here to fulfill my desires. So I think there is this, I often catch myself reciting Nembutsu in these situations, and it's so, it's not that it wasn't supposed to be like that when I study, when I read, like, oh, Nembutsu has to really come from the heart as an act of gratitude for realizing the power of Amida in our lives and all this, the doctrine discourse around this. So I think it's more around this.
So you find someone guilty when you're reciting in seeking protection when you get in a plane and when you land safely. But when you land safely, you do recite the Nembutsu out of gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how about, doctrinally, we talk about when we recite the Nembutsu, that Nembutsu, the sound Namo Amida Butsu, is actually Amida, Amida's presence. Do you feel, how do you feel about that? Do you
Mhm. I think that even though like most of these recitations come, I can feel that come in this like selfish way. There are also situations where it helps me deal somehow, like to connect to the reality of the bumpy road that I am in, like in a more meaningful way. So there are also these moments where I feel that it comes in a different way. So I have an example. I thought about it to give it to you. So since I moved countries, I have been thinking more about my grandma, who is like 86 years old now, and she's living with my mom in my hometown. And she's gradually losing her audition and memory, and it's kind of hard to keep a conversation with her now, like especially on camera. And I often worry about her health and keep thinking I should be close to her in this moment. And rationally, I know it's not an option right now, and that being there would not be of that much help.
Mm.
But a couple of weeks ago, I called her and she had to go to the hospital to take out some annoying speck in her eye earlier that day. And while she was telling the story to me, she was smiling a lot, despite still feeling some pain. And after thinking about her attitudes, Nembutsu immediately came to me in gratitude for realizing that she has people to help, and she's capable of keeping a good attitude towards her problems, and much better than me, I think. So I think this is an example of this more meaningful Nembutsu I sometimes experience. Yeah.
Okay, sounds very good. Thanks for sharing that. And let me go to the third one. Uh, what should I or you think about the six perfections, the golden chain, and other ethical guidelines that we have? Because often religion is thought to, promote ethical conduct, and Jodo Shinshu, especially, I know you probably don't have golden chain in Brazil. Yeah, so are there something like that, six perfections, or tell us about that in terms of what you do as kind of like quote unquote practice.
So I learned about the golden chain and the practice of six perfections on Higam periods in last year's course.
Yeah.
So I didn't know about that. I think we don't have that as an articulate practice in Brazil.
So let me clarify. So in Brazil too, you don't practice the six paramitas, perfections, during the equinox or Higam period, as we do in US and maybe in Canada. But for those of you others, please know that this is unique to North America, not in Japan. In Japan, they don't do that. And I thought that was, because I grew up in North America or the US, I thought that was a regular Shinshu practice. And there's Reverend Nanjo here who's from Tsukiji, and I think it was you and a few others. Maybe you weren't there, but I told some younger ministers at Tsukiji about this, and they all they asked, what are you talking about? They had never heard of it. And so that was a surprise to me. Well, anyway, so go ahead.
Okay. I think in Brazil, it's more common to refer to the 4 daily principles of Shin Buddhism for everyday life as ethical guidelines. I don't know how I have this in my service book in Portuguese, like there are like 4 phrases. But I don't know how is it translated to English. So maybe it's also on the service book in English. But it would be like in confidence. I try to make like I don't know if it's an accurate translation, but that would be 4 phrases. So in confidence in the Buddha's vow, I recite an Nembutsu and live with vigor and youthfulness. The second one would be in reverence for the Buddha's light. I always reflect on my behavior and will strive to live with gratitude.
Yeah.
Third one, in deep listening to the Buddha's teachings, I choose the right path and contribute to disseminating the Dharma. And the fourth one, in the joy of the Buddha's compassion, mutual respect, and mutual help, I will dedicate myself to the good of society.
Yeah.
So
okay.
This is something that we...
yeah, it's called Seikatsu no Shinjo, Seikatsu Shinjo. And it's in English, it's at least in Hawaii, it's called Shinshu Pledge. And it has how we live our daily lives. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think we would also recite this and say together in the, after a service, like these 4 phrases. And it's, I think, not only then, but also the golden chain and the 6 perfections, they are like important tools to understand Buddhist values and they can really serve as a compass to guide our daily lives in our world, like full of injustice, of inequality, of suffering. So I think they give us a sense of engagement with our surroundings and offer us a way to connect with reality by realizing also our own limitations when we try to do that. Like we realize that we can't really do in a way that leaves ourselves behind, like in a truly altruist way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is interesting because of that. Like it's good to have this as something to keep us in our path, and also realizing that we can't really fully practice this as bombus.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think these ethical guidelines do help us to kind of relate to others in society and do something positive whenever you can. And Golden Chain is full of that, you know. I will protect those who are weaker than myself. And then here in the pledge that you just read, you know, do the best for the welfare of humankind. There is a concern for the broader society. Okay, good. So the fourth question is it okay to meditate as Shin Buddhists? So I'm sure you engage in meditation, but in Japan, Shin Buddhists don't really actively meditate. And so what do you think? How do you think about that?
Yeah. Yes, I find value on meditation as a Shin practitioner, as I feel it helps me connect with the Nembutsu and to make sense of the Dharma in my life. So, and curiously, my relation to meditation doesn't come from other Buddhist or religious traditions. It has more to do with my own experience in the Brazilia Temple, where Sato Sensei introduced meditation practices as a way to engage with different audiences.
Mm-hmm.
So after a Dharma talk in a service, he would start an Nembutsu guided meditation and ask us to concentrate on the message of that teaching that he told us that day.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how does it relate to our own lives and the world we live in now?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was a precious time to absorb the words and make sense of the teachings. And he would also recommend us to have daily 5-minute meditation sessions, concentrating on our own feelings after that day. So somehow it was part of my path in Shin Buddhism. And now I realize it's not really an orthodox path, because we know that it's not common to have meditation at services in other temples. But for me, I think the most interesting twist that Sato Sensei made was to face the Shoshinge and the other chantings that we do regularly as chanting meditation.
Uh-huh.
So he would say, we as Western people, without any knowledge of the Japanese language, we have an advantage because we can recite the original verses without bothering with its meaning and translation at that moment. So we can really focus on the rhythm, the breath, feel the air flowing, our physical posture. And most importantly, it put ourselves in the here and now and make us feel the deep connection with the Sangha when we sing along together. So for me, it's like beautiful and somehow makes me closer to Amida Buddha, to like to think of that, of chanting as meditation as well.
Oh, okay. Chanting as meditation. All right. I just want to mention that this is a huge issue in Shin Buddhism, and a recent controversy in the Honganji has kind of brought up this point. So meditation, ethical conduct, these are, you know, considered self-power. But I have spoken to the high-ranking scholars in Jodo Shinshu and confirmed with them that as long as what you do is not for the purpose of gaining shinjin and ultimately rebirth. If that is not the specific goal, then they say anything is possible. That it's not jiriki, it's not self-power, if it's not meant to, attain shinjin and birth in the Pure Land. So if you're doing it for other purposes, that is not self-power, and that is not to be rejected. And so that is one thing that has become clear, at least for me. And so I think all of you listening, if you're not aware, there is that kind of thought, and I think that most people would agree that if you're doing meditation to gain shinjin, or then that would be self-power. But if you're expressing gratitude, or maybe for therapy, or releasing tension, whatever, then that is not necessarily self-power. Okay, so let's get to the last question, which has to do with self-power, other power. And this is a huge issue, of course, but what are your thoughts, Teo?
Yeah, it's I still find it a bit hard to understand, to fully understand.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Oops.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, so I see self-power as a sense of
Oh,
it appears to me like the host muted me. But
oh,
okay, so I think I see self-power as a sense of knowledge and control over life, and it makes me feel that I can like become a good person by my own effort. And in an ultimate stage, that is what makes me think that I am separated from others. And I think it manifests itself every time I struggle with feelings that I can't accept, or when I criticize others for their actions, or when I'm not being fully honest to myself. And for me, like the easiest way to define other power would be to say it's the opposite of self-power. So it escapes our control. It acts naturally in our lives. It is, I think it would be like the interdependence of all beings, the feeling that I don't exist apart from others, and that everything I do is made possible by many causes and conditions. So yeah, that's I would define both of them.
all right. So self-power is when you understand it as when you are involved in thinking or actions where you are thinking mostly just about yourself. Is that the way you?
Yeah, or to see me as something that is not part of my surroundings,
Okay.
like just as someone better than others, or someone that like special somehow. And I know like there are many things going on social media and news right now that like leads us to think that way. So yeah, I would say I experience self-power a bit in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the other power you understood as your connection to others. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, in Shin Buddhism, self-power, other power has more specific meaning, and self-power is, has, as I said a little earlier, that it has to do with realizing shinjin and ultimately rebirth, and thinking that you have the confidence through your own efforts to own power to realize that on your own. And and then other power has to do with the primal vow. The vow itself is the other power, so it's much more specific. But Teo, I think your appreciation of self-power, other power, as you describe it, is related to it, and so it's I think it's a a good way of appreciating the more specific understanding of self-power, other power. But I just want to emphasize again that you can engage yourself in social welfare, helping others, or giving up a seat in the train, and not feeling hesitant because you think, oh, that's self-power. Some people have made kind of a joke out of Honganji. Well, that some people feel that Honganji doctrine may prevent people from even giving up seat to an elderly person in a train, because that would constitute, self-power. But again, that's not the case. If it's not related directly to realizing no shinjin, then there's much more is possible. Okay, so thank you. That's half an hour, and we would like to open it up for questions or comments to Teo. So please feel free to ask him about what he said or clarifying what he said. Please.
I have two questions, Sensei, in the chat.
Okay.
From iPhone 2. By the way, can you, iPhone 2, please rename yourself so I could address you by your name? So the one question from iPhone 2 is example of wrong dharma. I'm not sure. Did somebody bring up right dharma? Why is the question?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned I was referring to not wrong dharma, but having a wrong interpretation of dharma. Like when I was talking about listening to the dharma as a practice.
Oh.
So I think it would be not wrong dharma, but having a wrong interpretation about teachings.
Teo, can you give an example when you thought you had you understood it wrongly?
Maybe this also this something that you Sensei just talked about, this difference between self-power and self-effort. So I think it would be like a wrong interpretation to feel that I can't try to help others because it would be considered self-power. So I think it doesn't relate to the ideal of Shin, because and it can be common, like as you said, like the people I want like leave my place and give it to some other person, because that would be me trying to be better than others, or to say that I can do that, the other person can do that. So I think that would be some kind of a misconcept, because I think we can refrain to be ourselves, like in society, and defend our causes and like fight for justice and for things that we see as right when we relate that to Dharma, just because of this interpretation of self-power and self-effort, like this misconception. I think that would be a good example.
Okay, so you're saying self-power is, of course, as we have kind of defined it, that is problematic in Shin, but you're saying self-effort is what we can do, because, listening to the Dharma is an effort. I mean, taking this class is an effort. Reciting the Nembutsu is an effort, but you don't take, all the credit, or, I'm good because I'm doing these things. So that would be self-power. So the difference between self-effort and self-power, that's a difference I've made it in the past as well. Okay, so second question.
Okay, okay. I think iPhone 2 turned out to be Reverend Kubata. So the second question from Aaron Kubata is, how is the issue with meditation different from being okay with yoga?
Teo, do you understand the question?
The issue with meditation different from being okay with yoga? Like, if that's okay, to do yoga as a practice as well as it would be to meditate?
Reverend Kubata, can you unmute yourself and clarify your question? Oh, maybe he's working on using a different computer, so I don't think he knows how to unmute. Maybe his daughter can help him. Young people do much better. Okay. Well,
meanwhile, I'm sorry, are you done? There's another question.
Go ahead.
A question from Elsie Lum. How old were you when you were first touched with Shin Buddhism? It must be difficult without a sangha around you. How do you get ongoing support for your faith?
Yeah. So when I realized, like I said, I started going to the temple, to the Obon festivals, and I didn't know exactly what. I didn't feel like the connection between Buddhism and the festival itself at that time. But when I first entered the introduction to Buddhism course, it was 8 years ago. So if I'm 35 now, I was 26. Is that it? I think so. So yeah, and I think it is hard to be like, to not having a sangha to support me like physically. I know like
Oh, I wonder why.
I know that.
Go ahead.
I'm back now. That many things changed during the pandemic, and we have like more access to this online kind of groups. But it's really hard, like also because I'm in a very different time zone from my old sangha. So now it's 12 o'clock for me in Melbourne, and it must be like 10 p.m. For them in Brazilia. So it's hard like to be in touch with my old friends, with my old sangha. So I'm trying to and also they have like many presential activities, and like they don't do as much virtual encounters as we did during the pandemic. So what I'm trying to do is to engage with other kinds of activities, such as this one that we're having now. I think that's important for me, like to keep my daily practice and contact with the Shin teachings. And also I mentioned there is this new Sangha group that was created by Enrique Sensei in Spain. So he's gathering people from all Latin America and from Spain and Portugal to spread the teachings in Portuguese and Spanish. And this group is really interesting because there are like people from all regions of the world. And it's really nice, like that people are always like talking about the teachings and like spreading, I read this article, you should read it as well, and we can comment on that. So we have some online sessions too. So this is what like keep me somehow connected to the teachings more than studying alone and chanting alone.
Okay.
Because I think it's really fulfilling somehow.
So it seems that you even though you didn't grow up a Buddhist or Shin Buddhist, but you went to the Sangha in Brazilia, and then now that you're in Australia, you're isolated, but you're connected, online, and then especially with the Portuguese and Spanish speaking group, which is really good. Okay, next, any further questions?
No, nothing in the
Okay,
chat.
Reverend Kobata, do you want to clarify your question about the yoga? Well, he's still muted. Okay. Anyone else, please? All right. So, all right, David Tan. Please.
Teo. That's a very interesting experiences, especially being from Brazil in Australia right now, and what I think you've been asked this question already, but what practices do you usually do, given that you're in an environment very different than what most Shin Buddhists would be able to practice in?
So when I moved here, I brought like my service book. I brought my of the things like the some books and the sutras from Jodo Shinshu. And I have my own, like the image of Amida Buddha, and I have like my own kind of oratory. So I made it like improvised it here. So I try to at least once a month have like simulate a kind of a service and like try to recite the whole Shoshinge, Nembutsu, Wasan, and like this is and like do it as we did it also in Brazilia, and like including some meditation on my feelings or on something that I've read or studied that week. So that's what I've been trying to do in a regular basis, and but also like engaging with this online activities. It really, because when I do it alone, it's very like it's good. I feel good. It's like fulfilling. It's I feel connected somehow. But I always like miss, like it's a bit frustrating not having someone to talk to and like to share what, if I understand it correctly or not. So doing it like just by correspondence or by email is it's not the same thing. So yeah,
Okay.
but this is what I try to do at least once a month.
Thanks,
like
Teo. Sorry to cut you off, but I want to get a few other questions. So, Cora Jean, you have your hands up.
Oh, I wondered, Teo, how does your wife practice with you? And how do you keep a schedule, or do you keep a schedule? And how do you motivate yourself to chant every day? Or do you chant every day? How do you motivate yourself?
Yeah. So my wife, she's been very like influenced by me. So she's not really, she didn't used to go to the temple in Brazilia, like as much as I would go. But in the end, she was like already engaging at the Obon Festival, volunteering to work there. So I think somehow she's really present in this like spiritual life, and I feel grateful for that. Like we try to, when I do like this Shoshinge recitation and meditation, I usually do it with her. So I ask if she is interested in doing it now, so we can do it together. But it's not always, because she's very busy with the PhD. But yeah, I feel grateful that she, even though she's not I don't know, actually this is an interesting question. I don't know if she considers herself a Buddhist, but I think she is like trying to, and she's really into it when and supportive like of my practice.
I think it's wonderful if you can do it together. It's fabulous if you can do it together, but it must be difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. All right. I'm sorry. I think we are out of time. And so if you have question, maybe you can write it on chat and maybe we can get it later. Okay, so thank you so much, Teo. We would like to go to Reverend Greg Gibbs, who is a resident minister at Pasadena Buddhist Temple in Southern California. So Reverend Gibbs, welcome and thanks for joining. And
thank you.
Okay, so like we did with Teo, maybe you can take 5 minutes or less to say a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Well, as I told you, since I have caught the COVID infection, so I'm struggling. I don't have my usual energy tonight.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're able to join because we wanted for you to prioritize your health. But thank you for joining. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm pleased to be here. Thanks. Yeah. Of course, I'm 74 years old, and besides being a resident at Pasadena, I'm also supervising minister of San Diego Buddhist Temple, which is very active. And the Arizona Buddhist Temple, which just had its 90th anniversary. I saw David over there. I have a problem with the time change because I fly out of Burbank, and when we're not on daylight savings, it's the same time, and I can't get there on time because they won't fly out of Burbank before 7 a.m. So that's one of my challenges: daylight savings time not being observed in Arizona. I started as a philosophy student in high school, raised as Roman Catholic. I think a point of contact with Catholicism is the ability to encounter the sacred in something small and discreet, whether it's a wafer of unleavened bread or whether it's Namo Nembutsu. That capacity for religious experience and the phenomenology of the ultimate within the limited, I think, is useful. It's a useful part of my background. I was involved with Aurobindo Gose's integral yoga and since 1968, and also Zen Buddhism. And I dropped the yoga because I don't believe in God. And the funny thing is, I went to Zen because I love the form of meditation, Soto Zen Shikantaza, and then I moved into the school of Buddhism that doesn't need meditation at all. I did a little Rinzai too, didn't like it. I loved Robert Aitken, who I studied koans with for a year, but I did not like koan meditation. Loved Shikantaza. I still teach it once a week as a access point for people who don't know where to go and where to go for it. There's better places in our temples. But as everyone's been saying, as long as it's not directed to transforming one's consciousness into shinjin or enlightenment, any practice is fine, meditation, whatever. The difference from yoga is that I teach Tai Chi, and that's wonderful. It's absolutely different. It's very, very hard. If you haven't done Tai Chi and it wasn't miserable, you haven't done Tai Chi. It's really hard. And so I love that it's just the opposite of Namo Nembutsu, which is, did I say Nembutsu? It doesn't matter. It's just the opposite of the vow, which is there whether I call it or whether I think of it or not. The light that surrounds us at all times. Very different from something I do to my body by torturing my legs for 49 years now, 50 years next year. I went through philosophy when they had this horrible stuff called the linguistic turn, Wittgenstein. If Ludwig Wittgenstein had never been born, nothing would change on the planet Earth. It was a terrible period in Western philosophy where they just chatted about words and didn't talk about anything meaningful. And so I didn't do well in a PhD program, bailed out of it. Went to IBS. I encountered Shin at Fresno Buddhist Temple, 1983, 40 years ago. And it clicked for me right away, partly because I had no confusion about Buddha being anything like God. I had no confusion of the Pure Land being anything like heaven. The Nembutsu obviously was nothing like a prayer. Because of my background in both Zen and Catholicism, a lot of the problems that our tradition presents to newcomers weren't problems for me. And it clicked for me right away. And my emphasis is the vocal Nembutsu. I think there are about 8 crucial aspects to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. The narrative of the Buddha, The Buddha, absolute subjectivity. The vow, absolutely real. Is the land real? Is the Buddha real? The vow is real. The vow is a promise. We've all made it. We've all made it in our hearts, and the Buddha has made it and completed it. The vow, the Buddha, the pure land, the narrative, Shinjin, sure, and Nembutsu, vocal Nembutsu. And in the 21st century, everywhere I go, the crucial component of our path, which is neglected, is the vocal Nembutsu. So that's my introduction to myself, and I'll go ahead and try to respond to your questions as best I can, Sensei.
All right, great. Well, it sounds like you answered most of them, but let's put some meat on it. And so the first question is, what do we practice in Shin Buddhism?
Namo Amida Butsu. And it's also, I rely upon the source of limitless wisdom and endless life. It can be voiced in English if you want to. But as Reverend Sato said to Teo Sensei, it's good if you don't understand what it means. You're getting closer. This is the deep meaning of the Article 9 of the Tanisho, which is consistently mistranslated. There is no phrase self-working in chapter 10 of the Tanisho. What it says is that the meaning of the Nembutsu is to be attached to no meaning whatsoever. And that is that where Nama Nembutsu is the voice of the Buddha. What does it mean? It means you're going to be okay. It means everyone's going to be okay. Does it mean something else? Nama Amida Butsu, the direct encounter with the truth beyond interpretation.
Mm-hmm. So I know you do emphasize voiced Nembutsu, and so I think you say vocal. Can you say a little bit more about why you think saying is important?
It's an encounter that is not, you can't be in control of. If it doesn't come spontaneously. When you decide you're going to say Namo Amida Butsu, you say Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Pretty soon it's something you encounter and it's real. It's not a conceit. It's all right to hold it in your mind if you're in a plane or something, but if you don't voice it, it's going to turn into a conceit that you think you're saying the Nembutsu, or you think you're thinking about. Namo Amida Butsu is real. It's a sound in the room. I heard it. Namo Amida Butsu.
Okay. What do you think of another so-called practice, or what we can consider to be effort, listening to the Dharma? And Teo mentioned that listening to the Dharma, that is emphasized in Shin. And what does it mean to you, listening to the Dharma, Chomon?
Yeah, Sensei. Well, of course, it has at least two kind of distinctive meanings. And the one is that encounter, Namo Amida Butsu, just to hear. But the other meaning is, of course, as Renyo elaborates, to think critically. And this thinking critically is important because it is part of your own personal integrity. You're being unreal if you don't do that. If you don't try to understand the Dharma intellectually, conceptually, verbally, there's something insincere about your engagement. The other side of that is it really does not matter how well you get it. And that's, you may know I'm working with Dennis Hirota on editing a text of his right now. And we're getting into some pretty complex stuff about the name and the light and everything. And that you need the name, the name and the light and the duality to create the unity. That's all means when I hear the Buddha's name, it's the Buddha calling me. That's all you need. When I call the Buddha's name, it's the Buddha calling me. That conceptualization is adequate if you don't need more. But if you have an education, if you're a thinking person, you've got to think more. You've got to look more deeply. Otherwise, you're not being real. That's the problem. But if you had to drop out of high school to support your family like my mother did, when I hear the Buddha calling me, when I call the Buddha's name, it's the Buddha calling me, as Suji Sensei put it. That's it. That is it.
Okay, I think that's really important. So once again, just for clarification, you're saying when you call the Buddha's name, Namo Amida Butsu, then you understand it or appreciate it as the Buddha calling me. That's how?
Yeah, it is the emergence of goodness, the emergence of the sacred into the secular world that I live in.
Okay, so I rarely hear, people talk about that in such a concrete and clear way. And I think for some of you listening, that can be an important aspect of your spirituality, that, when you say the name and you understand that, I appreciate that as the Amida calling you. And it's kind of clicked with me as I hear that. Okay, thank you. Do you have any more to say on that particular point, Reverend Gibbs?
I don't think so, Sensei.
Okay, all right. So, and I think the second question is, what is the role of Nembutsu in your life? And can you say a bit more about that? I know it's related already to what
Right, yeah. I think there are two things I would emphasize. Is the one that we're also clear on is what I haven't spoken of yet, I think, is that the Nembutsu is disruptive, that it is disruptive of our ideology. Namami Nambutsu is the truth. How does that compare with the fact that I'm a leftist and that I believe in a broader distribution of wealth and a change in the systems of production? It compares with something that's groping and something that's real. Namami Nambutsu is real. I'm still going to fight for equality. I'm going to fight for justice. I'm going to fight for fairness. But all my ideas about such things are so superficial compared to what I believe is happening with Namami Nambutsu, which is the liberation of all suffering and deluded beings. Shinran in poems tells us that we include the land and the grasses and the sands. Dogen says that in a text, but Shinran will only say it in poems. He knows the difference between prose and poetry. But what is true there is an absolute inclusiveness. There is nothing left out of the light. There is a light breaking through process. Universal process is purifying itself, is renewing itself. There is a process of renewal, which is the Nembutsu, which is the vow. And this is renewal of reality itself. So all deluded and suffering beings. One of my recent raps is that a lot of us think we're going to see our mother in the next life, and I sure do. But are you going to see your cat and your dog? Absolutely. Cindy, Kitty, Fella, Sheppy, you bet. We pause there because in what form will they be? The same problem with your mother, right? This inclusiveness is of all subjectivity. Buddhism acknowledges the puzzle about what identity is, what subjectivity is, but the light includes all subjectivity. Every living thing will be lifted up into the light.
When you say subjectivity, what can you say a little bit more? What?
Yeah. Subjectivity emerges from biological process. You and I are persons because our biological process allows the emergence of this personhood. That personhood theoretically can be reconstituted in a different body. And this is what Shinran tells us and what Buddhism tells us. We need about 3 models. That old, what the Hindus call reincarnation, that old model of a multiverse with various versions of us is important. That model can be used as well. The model of the one great mind, we find Kyoshin repeat to Shinran in the Matosho. To enter the Pure Land is to become one with the light, which is the Buddha, and one with the vow. On the other hand, it's as Article 5 of the Tanisho tells us, it's to come back in person, personally, to look after those you care for. So these very different models are all necessary to illumine the one truth, which is beyond our current ability to understand.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have a fever, so excuse me for
no problem. No problem. So let's talk about the 6 perfections and the golden chain and what role these ethical guidelines play in your life.
Yeah, the thing is that, as anyone will tell us, how you live is the most important thing. If any religion or philosophy says it doesn't matter how you live from day to day, that's false dharma. The only falsehood is that karma doesn't matter, that it doesn't matter how we act. That is not Buddhist. It does matter how you act. And so we've got to compare ourselves, well, why did they not go on about all this in Japan 800 years ago? Even though Shinran is the most political figure in the history of Japanese Buddhism, of course, he wrote a text saying that the emperor and his advisors were unjust and they behaved with enmity and pettiness. No one else in history has done that. He was the most political priest in the history of Buddhism, yet he didn't tell us to do so. It's a little bit of a paradox there. How you behave is absolutely crucial, but you know, Shinran knew how to behave. He was a decent Japanese gentleman. You know, 100 years ago, I wouldn't know how to behave because I was a decent Irish Catholic boy. You know, Irish Catholic boys don't go to the brothel because someone might see you and tell your grandmother. Japanese boys don't go to the brothel because someone might see you and tell your grandmother. That kind of social structure is down now. You can't just trust people to know what's good on the basis of being a decent person of their own culture. You need guidelines. And I love that Seikatsu Shinjo, came out of the Yamaguchi Ken about 30 years ago. The six paramitas, the problem is they're more there to tell us what the Buddha is or what the ultimate goal will be. Sure, Dana we can participate in. Shila, we must participate in being decent. Shanti, patience, it's not really anything we need to talk about too much. Virya, it'd be very different for us. We need to keep some gas in the tank, you know. Dhyana, meditation, that's where we come in. We don't usually meditate in a formal way, but what I think is universally important is that the path has to bring us to a composure of body, mind, and feeling life. And that, I think, does come through the Nembutsu teaching. We don't sit in a constant state of composure, but neither do the Zen or the Shingon or the Tendai. But we do find, just as them, that through our path, composure comes into our mind, our body, and our feeling life.
Does Nembutsu participate in that, what you say as composure? Well,
I think yeah, but it's kind of indirectly. It's like asking a bowler what they do with their left hand when they're going down the approach if they're right-handed. It's there, but not the thing you want to pay too much attention to.
And how about wisdom, prajna? What is that for Shin Buddhists, do you think?
Well, I think it's not any different for us. I think we do want to have insight into the truth, but the thing that we consistently find, I think, is that Shin Buddhism is centered on an acknowledgement of the fundamental limits of human experience. And some other schools of Buddhism have not done that. This is why there has to be a pure realm. This is why the Buddha is absolute subjectivity, the subjectivity that takes us up into ourselves. Subjectivity is being the subject of experience and the subject of actions. This is important. We are taken into an infinite subjectivity in the Buddhahood of the pure realm. All these fulfillments, I think, are very necessary. But again, right now, I cannot articulate that in a coherent, consistent way. And that is part of my limitations as a human being. I'm never going to get it, you know. As you know, my son's in astrophysics, and one of the great things for me about that is I have no idea what they're talking about, you know. You know about entanglement? They got a particle in Irvine and a particle in Santa Barbara. You move this one, that one moves. You move that one moves. Entanglement, no one knows why. The subatomic particles do travel in time. All this stuff. Every particle has an opposite, and when they meet, they explode and disappear. This is the real world. This is the physical world we're living in. It totally goes beyond my understanding. And yet, Namami Rabutsu, there is a light, there is a name, there is a promise. I absolutely believe in the promise.
Okay, so so the next question has to do with meditation. And is it okay for Shin Buddhists to meditate?
Well, yeah, again, just as you and Teo said, that as long as you're not trying to form Shinjin or enter the Pure Land, you know, and in a way, Honen is even clearer on this than Shinran. I think he's so simple, you know, and as Honen says, you know, what is this trying to purify your mind in order to be taken up into the Buddha's mind. That doesn't make any sense. You're just delaying things. The mind you have right now is the one you want to be taken up into the Buddha's light. There's no waiting. We don't have time. There is no time. There's no time to wait.
Okay. Anything, needless to say, the popularity of mindfulness meditation is so huge. I mean, it's being re-imported to Japan from the US and also from Southeast Asia. If any young people in Japan take interest in Buddhism for the first time in a very serious way, often has to do with their interest in meditation and mindfulness meditation. So it's something that I believe is a kind of part of the contemporary religiosity, how people, get into Buddhism. I mean, many people in Japan got into Buddhism because of ancestor veneration. They're concerned about their ancestors and how to take care of them after they die and how to deal with great. So that was a way for many Japanese to get into it. But now, I think that the contemporary demand or the need it can be found in the interest in meditation. And Teo too in Brazil got into Buddhism, supported by involvement in meditation. So do you feel, Reverend Gibbs, that in Shin Buddhism in North America especially, do you think we should be more active in getting people active in providing meditation? Do you do meditation at your temples?
Yeah, I teach meditation once a week here, and I teach basically shikantaza, mindfulness of breath, and then metta meditation. I used to do visualization meditation, but I've done it for 56 years and I'm bored with it, so I don't teach that anymore. Mindfulness, there's one absolutely crucial point, and you understand this, Sensei, that mindfulness does not mean attentiveness. And that's what we have to get across to people. Attentiveness is a subclass of mindfulness. What Buddhists mean by mindfulness is to be mindful of the Dharma. Does that mean you're attentive right now? Sometimes. Does that mean you're daydreaming right now? Sometimes. Mindfulness isn't about not daydreaming, and it is not about being fixedly present in the moment. That attentiveness is always temporary. And sometimes, because I am 74, I have some degree of cognitive loss. And something I sometimes say to myself is, remain being mindful of important things, but resume being attentive.
By the way, you keep mentioning you're 74, but when I first saw you 2 weeks ago, after a long time, I said, boy, you haven't changed a bit. And I don't need to praise you or, flatter you. You're taking care of yourself very well.
Tai Chi is really good. Yoga is too. I wish I still did yoga, but it's only so many hours in the day. I do 7 minutes of yoga to warm up for the Tai Chi, and that's it.
Oh, is that right?
Some kind of regular, moderate exercise really helps. And then there's the fact that I'm almost all my hair is gray, but it looks brown because one hair in every 5 is a light brown, and so my hair looks brown, but it's actually gray.
Okay, but yeah, you look good for 74.
I do have the COVID right now, though. And I'll tell you one thing about those self-tests, if you guys are doing them, you know how you look at it to see if the line's there or not? Don't worry. It's a bright red line. When you have the COVID and you do that self-test, there's a bright ruby red line. No question. Yeah.
Boy, is this the first time you got it?
Yeah, this first time I got it. I did all my vaccinations and everything.
Yeah.
I did go out to Arizona for their 90th anniversary last weekend. So probably the airport.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Well, the last question has to do with the self-power, other power. And what is the difference in your view?
Yeah, and I think what I always emphasize is that so other power, Tadiki, is any positive assistance we receive from outside of ourselves. And so that would include the first bit of tariki that I received was from Shakyamuni Buddha, the concept of anatta, which, as Leslie Kalmer Sensei and I will emphasize repeatedly, does not mean no Pudgala or no Purusha. There is no soul to explain the Pudgala, the individuality that we all have. There is no soul to explain the continuance of the Purusha, the self which we all are. But the fact that there is really no fixed thing, no center there that continues, that it is a process. I never got that from 10 years of studying Western philosophy, never accepted it, always thought Hume's arguments were superficial, Sartre's arguments were inconsistent, but Shakyamuni Buddha taught me that there is no soul, and I would not have got that on my own. That was tariki. But Shinran is really only interested in a discrete subset of tariki, which is Hongan Riki, the transformation that can come into our lives through the fulfillment of the fundamental vow, the vow to liberate all suffering and deluded beings. So this is what interests me, Hongan Riki, and it may flow into our lives in many ways, but I only have some knowledge. I'm encountering it through saying Namo Midabutsu, and through a sense of an illumination that is coming there. I can't see the light, that passage of Genshin that Shinran quotes, 3 times? That the clouds are there, I can't see the sun, but by golly, somehow there's enough light for me to get by here. This is the truth, there is a light.
Okay, see, you said something which I was gonna ask you more about. Oh yeah, if you say there's no soul, then what goes to the Pure Land?
Nothing. Death is absolute and thorough. You end. The question is whether something can resume that is you. And there's no question that there's life after death. When I die, the universe will go on. The question is whether any of that is mine or in some real sense, in some discrete sense.
Okay, so I personally, Greg Gibbs or Ken Tanaka, does not individually go beyond, but then how would you explain the birth in the Pure Land?
There's a resumption, there's a process which resumes my subjectivity, which resumes my center of experience, so to speak.
Subjectivity.
That center itself is not a center, there's no dot there, but that is resumed there. Of course, Shinran tells us, basing himself on Korean texts, if I remember correctly, that the body in the Pure Land is the body of absolute potential, the body of boundlessness. And so that body will nonetheless be Ken Tanaka's body, Greg Gibbs's body. Our subjectivities will be within that vast process in the future. But what happens at death is an absolute ending, and nothing goes on. The old abhidharmic analogy is the grass fire. You got this grass over here. It's on fire. We can see this in high resolution slow motion photography now. The flame never moves on a grass fire. That when this grass is on a flame, the fuel totally burns up. That grass is gone. The flame doesn't move. Superheated air moves. That is analogous to karma. This grass bursts into a brand new flame. It is what it is because of the karma from the past, but it's absolutely new. Nothing is transmitted.
Well, this is a very complex issue, so we actually need much more time, but I myself got into Buddhism because I was afraid of death, my personal death, and that was one of the driving forces to got me into Buddhism. And in the process of studying Shinran, the one passage that has been consoling for me was that he talks about karmic consciousness, which is Shinjin. Shinjin, karmic consciousness, merges with the light and name, the father and mother.
Yes.
And that allows for the true body in the fulfilled land. So he talks about it in that way. So I find it in a solace or comfort in knowing that when I'm alive, I become one with the primal vow, or the light and the name. And then when this body ends, then I'm already part of that, encompassing life and light. And that I also will continue to return and to go other places in the realm, in the phase of returning, which Shinran doesn't really talk about in depth. But so anyway, but I think that for me, I may not continue, but I continue as part of something greater, and that is Amida and Amida's compassion. And so that's the general way that I appreciate that. But okay, so we've come to time, and so thank you, Reverend Gibbs, and let's we're going to open it up for 15 minutes of Q&A to Reverend Gibbs. So please bring it on. He's used to a lot of questioning, so
yes, there are 3 for now in the chat.
Okay.
Let me start with the question from Denise. Is meditating for the purpose of slowing myself down and observing the present a self-effort to allow me space to deeply hear the Dharma?
So, Reverend Gibbs, you want to respond to that? It's more of a comment, isn't it?
No, that's good. That's great. Yeah, I think that, and I think we do have to calm ourselves down, and I'm again being old. I have trouble getting to sleep at night, staying asleep at night. And one thing I read that I think it was a good suggestion is when you got those thoughts running through your head, just think them more slowly. That really works. You just slow it down. So yeah, whatever you do, the name is there to be heard. Are pushing it out there over and over isn't always going to do anything. Namanda, Buddhamanda, Namandabu, Namandabu, Namanda, Buddhamanda. I love to say the Nembutsu quickly and rapidly and flowingly, Namanda, Buddhamanda. But what really, one way or the other, what has to happen is I got to slow down to hear it. And so I think that what Denise says is very appropriate.
Okay. All right. Second one.
Let me read you a question from Johnny Remington Halverson. It's a sound in the room and I've heard it. Can you describe the energy or other you experience when you heard or hear this sound?
Well, no, I think one of the challenges is that it really is just Namo Amidabutsu. That's why I try to tell people, you can say, I rely upon the source of limitless wisdom and endless life. That's the Nembutsu too. But really, I remember talking to a religious studies scholar from Japan about 25 years ago, and he asked me which form of the Nembutsu I preferred. And of course, Shinran and Renyo both preferred Kimyo, Jinjipo, Muge Konyorai. I prefer Namanda because it's a direct access. But what I hear, I'm sorry, is Namanda. The significance of it comes from the understanding, again, as we were speaking earlier, that the need to listen to the Dharma in the sense of critical thinking and study. But Namanda is just Namanda. I don't look at something behind it other than the ultimate reality I live all the time, that I'm amid the light I'm in the midst of all the time that I cannot clearly see yet. Okay. I think that's the best I can do on that.
Yeah. All right. Another one? Igor?
Denise. Yes, there is another one from Denise. She writes, what happens at death is that my life as this person ends. Then I understand today from what you say that I become what I always was, part of an interconnectedness. Thus, it is not I alone that resumes in the Pure Land. Is this at all accurate?
No, the problem is you need more than one way of thinking. The reality transcends our ability to understand it. And the only way to get any handle on the truth is to use several different ways of thinking. And so one thing that happens when I die is that there is a new bundle of potential, a body of boundlessness, which is still my subjectivity. And that boy is going to come back here to make sure that his sons are okay. And that Buddha is going to find out what the hell became of his mother and his favorite pets in his childhood when they passed on. So that is going to happen. There's also part of the light that is this universal truth. There's a universal model there too. And there's at least a third way of thinking, which is a kind of multiverse thinking. I'm already in contact with those I love in other lives, in other realms. We do live in a multiverse. This thing is vast and complex. So there's at least 3 different ways in which my personhood will be resumed after death, but it is, in my opinion, a resumption. You have to let go, and then something new happens.
Okay. David, 10.
Hey, Reverend Gibbs. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's see. Sorry that you caught a bug in Arizona here. It sounds like one of the first questions you were asked is, what do we do in Shin Buddhism, and of course the practice? Well, the central practice, of course, is the Nembutsu. And that being the case, it sounds, in one hand, so simple, yet Shinran spent, at least in the English translation, a good 500-600 pages defending that whole practice, if it is even called a practice. And I guess it's probably not really a practice. The Nembutsu isn't really a practice because it's not an act of self-power, but of other power, because the other power is what's enabling you to do the Nembutsu, possibly similar to what happens when how a Roman Catholic is able to not work toward grace, but the grace enables him to move forward from that, if there's any relation there. So when you're discussing later on that what happens at the end of life, whatever is born into the Pure Land, it's not you that gets born in the Pure Land, but the you that is the process that was you. The process that was you is now in the Pure Land. It's same ocean, but your wave starts coming in, and by understanding that non-individuality is how it can be said, how Shinran can say that the Nembutsu is not a self-power act of an individual, but an other power act of Amida and the Nembutsu at large.
Well, the Shinran's way of putting this is something that people outside Shin circles do not get, which is the Nembutsu is a practice. No question about it. It is the great practice. It's given to us. It's completed before we receive it. So it's kind of like, here I have this damn COVID thing, and they ain't got nothing for it. If it was a simple bacterial infection, I could take antibiotics and it would cure it. And you know what I would have to do? I would have to put a capsule in my mouth and swallow it. Is that self-power? Is that something to worry about? What makes it work is what's in the damn capsule. I don't know what that stuff is. Somebody else put it in there. Somebody else figured out how to make it and put it in there. So that's like the Nembutsu. It's this powerful thing that I'm able to put into my voice, Nama Nabutsu. I don't make it work, but it is a practice. There is a vast period of time in which this practice has been perfected and fulfilled. So it is the great practice handed over to us. This way of speaking, I know, is elusive. And again, we're pushed back into acknowledging our human limitations. that we cannot understand this, and yet we must keep trying. Yeah, Shinran was quite an intellectual, and something that Tanaka Sensei can clarify this, that we've been thinking for years he taught peasants, you know, and now it turns out that an awful lot of his direct students were highly educated people. You need, Al Bloom used to say, you know, I don't know what's under the hood of the damn car, but somebody's got to, somebody's got to know what a rotor is and how to replace it if it goes out. But I just need to know how to, where the ignition switch is and how to turn the wheel.
Okay.
Johannes has a question.
Johannes?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question. Since every Buddha is other power for me, when Honen said, when you practice one Buddha, you you practice all Buddhas. What is with merit transference? Shinran says, if you have not Shinjin yet, you should chant the Nembutsu for the benefit of all being. This seems like a merit transference practice to me, but for me, it seems like in a lot of Shinshu literature, merit transference is discouraged. I practice Om Mani Padme Hum, for example. I'm not an exclusive practitioner. And especially in these times with all the wars and all the hard stuff going on in the world, I feel a psychological need to lessen this burden a bit and to at least try to get some spiritual help out there. And yeah, what's with merit transference practice?
Yeah, so again, the Shin angle on this is different than other traditions. Just like practice, merit transference has already been accomplished and is handed over to us. It's not something that I need to do. What I need to do is not merit transference. What I need to do is to make sure that a woman has a right to her own reproductive life in the state of Florida. What I need to do is to make sure that children aren't starving in Kentucky. You know, that's not merit transference. That's just simple human decency. Merit transference has already been accomplished.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Another question in the chat from Junko. What does a tomb mean to the dead? I ask this because there are people saying no need of tombs.
The fact that the person has a new life doesn't mean that their remains are not meaningful to us. My parents are buried in Fresno, California. We're going to go there. We got no other reason to go to Fresno than to go to those grave sites. So we're going to get back there next summer. Every good friend I have has moved out of Fresno. That's the thing about Fresno. All your friends move out, including yourself. I got one friend still left there. That's it. And I'll go to that gravesite. What does it mean? It means it's a point of contact with me, with the life that was my mother's and my father's. And it's just a place for me to recollect that I do believe they have new lives in this universe and that I do believe I will meet them again. And a term we need to bring in here is soku, the Chinese term soku, which sometimes means identical to. What's going to happen is it will be the identical of my meeting my mother and my father in the next life. And I go to the gravesite and I remember that. What is going to happen is that, well, not identical necessarily, maybe equivalent of, maybe exact equivalent of. It will be the exact equivalent of being reunited. That is what I understand the term soku to mean. And that's what I think we have to satisfy ourselves with. How it plays out on the other side is beyond my understanding. What must be done is within my understanding. Separation must be erased. Unity must be experienced.
Okay, Reverend Gibbs, in defense of Fresno, I have to say I love Fresno.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course, I don't know if I want to live there, but I love the grapevines and the Sierra Nevada that you can see, and the people are very down to earth, and so I have a lot of fond memories of Fresno.
Great place to be from.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I think we need to end this very fascinating set of discussions. And is there maybe one question or comment, Igor?
Well, Reverend Kubata here remarks about tombs. Aren't tombs graves part of cultural conventions?
Reverend Gibbs, you want to respond to that?
Buddhism is a cultural convention.
Yeah. But
We've got to accept our limitations again.
Yeah.
We have cultural conventions, and without them, we don't have anything.
So, Reverend Kubata, you want to say anything? Okay. All right, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Finally, thanks to my daughter, I figured all this stuff out.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
So
yeah, well, yeah, cultural conventions. Yeah, religion is cultural convention. Buddhism is cultural convention. That's why I started with the earlier question that I hope you could bring up with I don't know, is he a professor or doctor? Bachelor?
He's a layperson, Teo.
Okay. But no, with Dr. Bachelor.
Oh, Bachelor. Oh.
Tonight, yeah.
Yeah.
So you could ask him, he talks about secular Buddhism, but, people will say, get hung up on the secular part, but you could ask him, is Buddhism, what makes Buddhism a religion that you have to secularize? So what does he think of as Buddhism that needs to be secularized?
Well, he doesn't accept the reincarnation and also he mentions karma, but especially reincarnation.
Yeah, I know in the Tibetan traditions, the rebirth idea and karma are presented in a particular way. But anyway, I'm off the subject, so I just want to address the thing about cultural conventions. The way the death is handled, how human beings have tried to come to terms with death were death rituals. I mean, that's anthropologically how religion started, that people were trying to deal with death, and then you see these rituals that began to develop. And so, in a sense, religion began with death. Or the consciousness of concern, we could just say what it is that we're doing with living. And that's kind of the basic beginning. So, the ohaka or the grave or tomb, these are current modern expressions of how we come to terms with that essential existential concern.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I think that that doesn't conflict with the importance of tomb spiritually as well. So
sure. So do whatever floats your boat. Yeah. So that's the whole thing of these things that appear on the surface of life.
Yeah. The problem is in Japan, those people who think they're Buddhist, they think Buddhism is exclusively about grave sites and funerals and memorial services, and they don't really seek the Dharma for themselves. And that I find to be a limitation. And it, the ancestor veneration should be part of the whole spirituality.
Yeah, and that's what you're trying to do, bring these questions or perspectives up for people to think about. And sometimes we get too busy to think about. Anyway, thank you for your bringing people together for this kind of conversation. Yeah, so that's it.
That's good.
Oh, but I would like to end with my little phrase. I put it in earlier. We talk about practice makes perfect, but I think we could rephrase it as perfect makes practice. Because there's a consciousness of, that's what we would call amida, that's immeasurable. And basically thinking of Reverend Gibbs' medical situation, healing is basically coming back to wholeness. And that's where medical science developed. And so it goes back to basic Buddhism. And that's why, for me, the mindfulness issue, I don't have a problem with it because it's trying to address, began in, at least in the Western form, John Kabat-Zinn trying to help people deal with suffering. And that's where Buddhism began. And so the people who want to exclude meditation, I think, are overlooking or discounting that original spirit of Buddhism, addressing suffering. But my question about the practice of yoga, because it's a new popular form, is kind of coming into some people's activities. And there's no kind of objections to that. So I'm trying to get a sense of, how meditation or mindfulness is different than yoga, where mindfulness, for whatever reason, was not acceptable because of past history or whatever. But yoga seems to be coming into the picture and people are okay with it. So that's why I keep asking that question,
Okay, well, good question. Maybe we can keep that on the table on the back burner. So we got to end it here. So we want to thank Reverend Gibbs and Teo Barbosa. So let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You applause on hand by just waving your hand like that.
Okay. All right. Okay, great to see you all, and thank you for the vibrant discussion. And we'll do it again next month. And please watch the video and please respond to the questionnaire. And so for those who like to stay on for the Nirvana hour, please, we'll take up a 5-minute break. And if Reverend Gibbs and Teo, if you're available, please join us. I myself won't be available for the whole thing, but I'll get it started. Okay.
I'm going to have to take a rest. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you will. We'll forgive you. Yeah, please take care of yourself. Okay.
Okay.
The temples need you.
Please feel better, Reverend Gibbs.
Yeah, please feel
Thank
better.
you. I'm doing better.